Welcome. We are going to make the spanner panel card. It uses the Peaceful Place Designer Series paper, the Stitched Stars die set, Poinsettia Petals stamp set, really just this one little saying, warm wishes from our home to yours, and Sparkle of the Season stamp set, which is may the sparkle of the season warm your heart and home. I'm just going to use that saying from this set. Okay, so to make this card, okay, I'm going to show you all the steps. This card uses the gorgeous Peaceful Place Specialty Designer Series paper. It contains 12 sheets, double-sided of course. One side is silver foil and the other side is a neutral pattern. So I just love this paper. Can't wait to do a lot of things with it. This one's interesting because it's 6 by 6. It's 4 6 by 6 pieces, but on the back it's a continuous pattern. This is Snowflakes with little silver stars. I don't know if you can see the silver in it, with a nice check on the back. It's kind of a random pattern of silver foil with a really nice lodge look on the back. A wood grain, silver wood grain with trees on the back. And then a gorgeous, gorgeous fir tree looking pattern that could be for a beautiful scrapbook page. So I'm going to use this paper today. I've chosen the 6 by 6 squares. I went ahead and cut one apart, and I'm only going to use this section out of it, and I'll show you how to cut it. And then I'm also going to use these beautiful snowflakes with the silver stars. So to begin, we start with a piece of basic gray, regular 8.5 by 5.5. I've scored it in the middle. Then before we fold it, I'm going to do a couple of cuts on this. Holding the paper in the 8.5 direction, make sure that your trimmer will allow this. I'm going to cut slits to the fold line, 1 1/4 inches in from each side. So since this piece of cardstock is 5.5, I'm going to do my first cut at 4 1/4, and I'm going to cut down to the score line. Now if I had the nice Stampin' Up trimmer, it's much easier to see where you need to end. I'm going to have to turn it over to do the other side, but once again it'll be at 4 1/4. I'm going to come down to that score line, and with this guillotine cutter I can't get quite all the way, so I'm going to have to use my scissors to finish that up. So I'm going to just check. Actually, I did really well. Okay, so this will fold like always. Remember, you want to fold the mountainside in. So we're going to fold it down just like that. As always, use your bone folder to get a nice sharp crease. So now I'm going to add my acetate to the card base. Now I've cut this, and my piece of acetate does like to disappear, but it's just a clear sheet. It is cut 5.5 by 4 1/4, and it's going to fit right on. I want to make sure that this center flap is turned down when I start, okay, because I want the 2 flaps to fold down on top, and then when I lift it up, it's going to pull the acetate away and see the other parts of it. Okay, so I want to make sure that this center piece is down. I'm going to put some adhesive up here. I want to try and make sure I don't run off the edge. With this video, it's a little hard for me to see exactly where I'm getting it, but I'm going to try and make sure, but I'm going to check to be sure and wrap any little bits of adhesive back around to the front so that I don't have it get stuck on something else. Want to be careful. I think I'm going to put it right here on the base. Line it up real well and then fold the flaps down over it. I think that's going to give me an easier adhering. Okay, so now when I lift that up, I can see the tape, but I'm going to cover that up, okay, in just a minute. So I'll set that aside for a minute. My next step is with the 6x6 section of the trees paper. I'm going to trim this. All I'm going to need of it will be for this center section. So if I look at it a minute, I see that I'm going to have just these trees. So I could put it anywhere I want, but I kind of want it in the middle there. Okay. So I'm going to cut this so that that big tree is saved for another purpose. But I'm actually going to cut it over here so that I just have the tree. So it's really 3.5 inches I'm going to give myself. Okay. So now that piece is for another purpose later on. And then here I have my piece I'm going to work with. Now, so we're going to make that to 4 inches. And then I need it. This section is 3 inches, so I want 2 3/4 so that I can have a little border. So there's my piece for the middle, and I'm going to stamp a little sentiment down here at the bottom. However, I want to make sure that my sentiment comes out perfectly. So I am going to take just a minute and I am going to stamp a little sample. I have here some grid paper. I cut up pieces of grid paper to use for this so that I can be sure that I have this perfectly straight. And I'm going to do a little sample. I'm going to make sure, yeah, that looks nice. Okay, so the grid paper, even though it doesn't give a nice grid on the paper itself, the fact that you have all those lines going across really helps you get a straight impression. So I'm going to stick my head probably right into this camera because I want to be sure that I get this very straight. And I'm just going to plop that down there, give it a nice strong impression, and voila, that is beautiful. I like that. Okay, now I'm going to do the same thing. I have an inside sentiment. Okay, I'm going to clean this off real quick with my chamois. I do love the chamois. It is so convenient as a way to clean my stamps. It's a ton easier, I gotta say, than the old Stamp and Scrub. Okay, and way better than a paper towel. Okay, so now my other sentiment is warm wishes from our home to yours. I'm going to do the same thing. This is going to go up towards the top, but I still just want to make sure that I have a good impression from this stamp. Like the first time you ink up a stamp, sometimes you don't get it completely smooth, so I just like to test it. So that'll be that. Now the beauty of this is just a piece of basic white cardstock, and if I mess it up, I got a backside to it. That other one was a designer paper, so I only had one. Now I want this up towards the top, and using that line across underneath the paper, it's going to help me get that straight and a beautiful image that easily. I do love Stampin' Up stamps. They're of a high quality, and you get crisp, sharp images. Also, using basic white as opposed to just plain old computer cardstock will give you a nicer image as well. Now on my snowflakes, I'm going to cut 3 snowflakes. 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 I'm going 1-inch strips to go on here on the 2 front borders, on the insides of there, and on the bottom here. Okay, so I'm going to cut 6 1-inch by 4-inch pieces. So I have to pull out my very old Stampin' Up guillotine cutter, and I want it to be, so I'm going to cut this at 2 inches and then at 1 inch. Now the current Stampin' Up trimmer is really convenient. Mine just works really well still, so I didn't need to buy a new one yet. I will though. So now I have this. There's 2 12-inch pieces at 1 inch wide, and I'm going to cut them off at 4 inches. I'm cutting them together. I'm lazy. Okay, so we're going to cut that at 4 inches. And then there'll be another one at 4 inches. Okay. So now I'm going to have 6 border pieces. So there's 2. Top. Now to me it's real important that these things all go on straight. Have it. And I'm not confident I have that. Okie dokie. So there's that. So now I have a saying. It's going to get, this one's going to go on the front. So I'm going to have to brush off the adhesive that sticks out, trying to get it to all stay around the back. Now you say, why did I put that saying so far down? Well, here comes the magic. So this is, see how delicate that is? And it actually cuts out the stars as nice, perfect little stars that you can use as other embellishments on your page, although I'm not on this one. So I'm going to just very carefully with my liquid glue. I like liquid glue. There's, you can also use the Tombow and a sponge and kind of dab it on with your silicone mat. But I don't know, I just do liquid glue, and I do real fine little dots just all over, particularly places where it's a little bit wider, so that it doesn't, because you know when you stick this to the, this is going to get stuck to the acetate, and you don't want it to run out from underneath this die cut. The glue won't absorb into the acetate, and so it's going to spread a little more than if it were going to paper. So I'm actually going to let this sit for just a minute and let some of the glue absorb into the paper just a little. It tends to make it neater when you put it onto your project. So to me, the glue being nice and neat and the paper being straight, those are huge. And then I'm just going to use my little take your pick tool and pick this up, and then if you look at it, the die cut is a little heavier on this side, and I think I'm going to run it at a bit of an angle, kind of from the top and come down a little bit. I want to hold it for just a little bit. This liquid glue takes a minute to set, but I want to be sure that it's on there nice and sturdy. Another trick is that if you get glue everywhere, you can take a chamois and you can actually dab up that glue with your chamois while it's still wet. Now make sure you don't have a whole bunch of ink on your chamois, right? Okay, so I'm going to let that just set for a minute. Okay, so look at this. Is this stunning or what? I do that, and then I do this. Oh, and I got another piece. There we go. So I'm going to right in. Okay. I'm making sure that this is nice and straight. And inside of where it's going to show, right? You don't want your inside piece to show when it's all folded up. So here we have, it's called a spanner panel card with Peaceful Place Designer Series paper. And that is mantle worthy. Okay, you're going to want to put that, somebody's going to want to put that on the mantle. So that's a simple stamping technique. Okay, you can do this and it's stunning and it is a beautiful output just like that. However, you can also step it up. I made the same card a little more dramatically. I silver embossed the saying. Observe that I decided to move the saying down. The original I had was up here. And then I decided to move the saying down and put the die cut up here instead. I just think I like that. I don't know. See, you have choices. You have tons of choices. But when you open it up, and see this with the extra silver on it, it's just a bit more blingy. Okay, so this is a stepped up card. So we have it very simple, which is a dramatic and beautiful presentation, or we can step it up. And all I did was to add 1/8 of an inch to each dimension. So where the DSP is 4 by 1, this is 4 1/8 by 1 1/8. And that gives you just a very narrow little border. Be careful if you're not steady with this, because it's harder to get your borders even if they're so narrow. I do like to use the liquid glue when I'm using such fine borders. It gives you that little bit of wiggle room.